I'm Dr. SCL. I'm a dad, a chiropractor, and the translator you didn't know you needed in this, the first year of parenting. This is Decoded, the first year, the podcast that turns baby brain confusion, mum burnout, and milestone panic into clarity you can actually use. Let's make sense of the chaos by decoding it together. One of the hardest parts of parenting, and a moment many parents don't talk about, is the trying to stay calm when your child's behaviour feels big. The meltdowns, screaming, constant movement, the emotional explosions that seem to arrive out of nowhere. You're trying to stay calm, you're trying harder, yet things feel worse. And eventually, after much self-doubt, a quiet thought starts to form. What am I missing? Am I doing something wrong? Now, this isn't intended to be a parenting podcast. Rather, like always, this is a podcast of asking questions. Questions like, what if behaviour at this age is less about discipline and more about communication from an overloaded nervous system? Because children don't wake up each morning trying to manipulate their parents. They wake up trying to adapt to the world with the nervous system they currently have. And when we understand that, when we stop seeing children as difficult and start seeing them as dysregulated, that changes everything. One of the biggest challenges in healthcare, let alone parenting right now, is that every man and his dog is talking about a dysregulated nervous system. Now, I'm going to save any rant about this topic for a separate podcast episode. However, let me just say two things. Number one is most people talking about regulating the nervous system don't have the knowledge or skills to follow through on that concept. And secondly, chiropractic is the OG of nervous system regulation, the restoration of neurological function and supporting the smooth transition between sympathetic, or your fight and flight, and parasympathetic, the rest and digest, states. And now we're back. As a result of everything I just said, many parents now tie nervous system regulation to the misconception that every behaviour is intentional, which then leads to the assumption that every meltdown is defiance, every emotional reaction is manipulation. Every restless child simply needs firmer boundaries. Now, boundaries matter. Consistency matters. Safety matters. But nervous systems matter too, because a child who is overwhelmed neurologically will often look behaviourally challenging. And this is where so many good parents become exhausted, because they're trying to correct behaviour without understanding the nervous system state underneath it. Because nervous systems don't behave, they respond. And you cannot discipline a nervous system into feeling safe. Sit with that for a moment. You cannot discipline a nervous system, especially a dysregulated one, into feeling safe. And honestly, that sentence alone changes how many parents see their child. The nervous system has one primary job: to keep us safe. And when a child's nervous system feels overloaded, overstimulated, dysregulated, tired, stressed, disconnected, uncomfortable, or neurologically disorganized, behaviour will change. Not because the child is bad, but because the nervous system is adaptive. Now, a dysregulated child may move constantly, become emotionally explosive, seek more sensory input like stimming, avoid sensory input demonstrated in the avoidance of certain textures in foods or clothing, struggle with transitions, become rigid or clingy or aggressive, or simply completely fall apart over the smallest of things. And parents often think, why are they overreacting? But through a nervous system lens, the child isn't overreacting. Their system simply doesn't have enough regulation capacity in that moment. Not because they're choosing it, because their system is overloaded. Behaviour is the output, and the nervous system is the source. This is where everything changes, because as I've said, you cannot discipline a nervous system into regulation. You can only support it. Many families I see are not dealing with bad behaviour. They're dealing with poor sleep, sensory overload, movement disorganisation, developmental stress, retained primitive reflex patterns, emotional overflow. And what's fascinating is that when nervous system organisation improves, behaviour often changes quietly. Not because the child was fixed or because chiropractic care treats behaviour, but because the child no longer has to fight so hard internally. Parents will often say, "He just seems calmer," or "she's coping better," or "everything feels less intense." That is regulation. So if you're listening to this wondering whether your child is difficult, I want you to pause before attaching labels. Instead, ask, what might my child's nervous system be communicating right now? Because behaviour is often the last thing to change when nervous system stress is present. Because state always comes before behaviour. And once you can see that, you can't unsee it. If this episode has resonated with you, share it with another parent who's currently feeling exhausted by behaviour that feels bigger than they understand. Because often, understanding changes everything. Until next time, trust your instincts, watch the patterns, and remember, strong foundations are usually built quietly. Dr. SCL, out. Thanks for listening to Decoded, the first year, where we translate the mess of early parenting into something that actually makes sense. Be sure to share this episode with a friend, a partner, or a mum that you know who is quietly struggling through the noise and secretly Googling every milestone. If you want to hear more decoding, follow @Mount Hawthorne Chiropractic on the socials. Let's keep decoding the chaos. No mansplaining, no pressure, no judgment, just clarity when you need it most. Please note, this podcast isn't medical advice. It's just smart strategies from a Gonstead chiropractor, a dad, and someone who's been in the room with hundreds of mums trying to make sense of their baby's development, their own postpartum recovery, and the constant noise that comes with modern parenting. Always chat with your health team for specific care.